Right, we are live. Good morning, everyone. This is my third live, and we're at 10:05 in the morning. So it's launch day, though. So, hi, everyone. I am back. We have got the Female Leaders on Fire podcast launch little mini festival today. Yay! I was just saying to Lynsay, so Lynsay will introduce herself in a minute, but she's been absolutely brilliant, my podcast editor. And I didn't realize I'd feel all emotional, I'd feel all like giggly, I'd feel all like really appreciated and supported, and people are saying nice things and really sharing it and reviewing and subscribing. And it's what a lovely day I'm having. I'm going to go to Edinburgh later on and have a little mini holiday. So, yeah. So, what we're going to do, get Lynsay to introduce herself in a minute. We're just going to talk about, because Lynsay's had a couple of different careers. Like, I think, like women have their own business, and we find our passion, we find our fire. I should use the words I actually use. When you find your fire, it's normally comes out of a couple of different chapters of your life. So I'll ask her to share those, and we're just going to talk a little bit about just some of the challenges of being a female leader in particular. What are the biggest lessons that she's had, and also just what changes do we think are needed to help women just know that there's a lot of support, and there's a clear way forward for them in the corporate world, rather than just feeling like they have to give more. And really, I talk about this in the podcast, but the more you give, the less that you'll notice, and how to kind of really take responsibility for your reputation and grow it in a way that feels good. So I'll just tell the story of how I met Lynsay, and I think I friendly stalked her for a couple of years, and then I did her podcast challenge, I think back in March, and I already had the idea. And I think I was saying earlier on my live on my own, my solo live, I put the podcast on my vision board in January, which is just behind me. You can see it probably that way. And I was at a point in that moment in time, through those months, I was really struggling with burnout. I was hyper anxious. There's so much going on that all I was doing was getting up and serving my clients, and then probably going back to bed. And I was worried there was something, a health reason, and I know now it was burnout. And I think the vision, and holding the vision of knowing that I wanted to step into being a leadership coach, knowing that I wanted to focus more and more on coaching rather than mentoring, and finishing my diploma roof, it all kind of came together. And I already had a podcast years ago, and that one I kind of fell out of love with it. I kind of grew out of it. So it just felt like the right time, as part of relaunching the business and the website and what I do. It felt right to have a different voice and a different tone and a different framework. So friendly stalk Lynsay, I did her challenge, and I think even the challenge week, I think we got the name, didn't we? And I was like super excited. So even the name came from like the challenge week, because I love an alliteration. And then it was just a bit of a no-brainer to get her help. And it's been a brilliant combination of knowing the technical stuff that is the stuff before that really put me off carrying on my podcast before, but also the cheerleader, but also the get it done. Because I thought, coming to a podcast, I can talk for Britain. I thought I got to the point with my old one, when I've said this to you before, but it's just easy, right? I'm just gonna show up and talk about a subject. I didn't realize that stepping into a new level and a slightly different audience, and everything's a little bit elevated. I didn't realize that when I set aside like 2 hours to record 3, I think it was two in my trailer, that was going to actually turn into 8 hours and tears, and then the dogs were going to kick off. Then my partner got home and asked me how it's going, and I'd cry, and and then the doorbell would go, and just all sorts. So I want to say thank you for being patient with me and nudging me along. And
brilliant. You've been amazing to work with. And I mean, of course, when you're leveling up, when you're leveling up, it always feels a bit tricky, doesn't it? But I think these episodes that you've released as the launch episodes, they're just fire. They're brilliant. And I actually left a review this morning where I said, obviously you've just said I've had a couple of careers, which I'll tell you about, but I left a review this morning saying, this is the podcast I wish I'd had when I was in corporate. I might not have left as soon.
But then you wouldn't be here, and I wouldn't be doing this. So that's a whole sliding doors thing going on.
Brilliant. It's just full of knowledge and value, and what you see is what you get. It's brilliant. So yeah,
thank you.
Thank you. Incredible.
So tell us a little bit about the different chapters of your life that have brought you to where you are now, and all the brilliant stuff that you're doing now.
Yeah, so I'm Lynsay, everybody. So I run the Podcast Boutique, which is a podcast agency. So we help lovely people like Nicola to get their podcast started. We work with agencies, we work with clients, businesses, all sorts of people. And that is something so far removed from how I started off in my career. It's unreal. So my career started in HR and training. So I've got 20 years in HR and training. Got a national training award, traveling all over the world. All sounds really glam, but it really isn't. You know that.
Really hard work, right?
You get to the point where you just feel like you're on the motorway all the time, missing things, just not being able to be around for the things that you want. And my kids were, fairly young at the time when I was at the peak of doing that. And it just got to the stage where it was just too much, and I'd just fallen out of love with it. And at the same time, my husband had just pivoted into a new career. He'd changed. We worked together years previous, and then he changed into education. So he retrained as a secondary school teacher in physics. I was like, talking about. So he did that, and I remember him saying to me how much he wished he'd done it years ago. And it was just, it's like something switched in my mind where I thought, I need to do this. So that was in September, and by the end of the year, I was like, right, I'm working for myself. So I did that sort of middle move that most people do when they leave their sort of real job, where I went into consultancy. So I was doing coaching for companies like the Co-op Group and all that sort of thing. So I did consultancy. I was getting like a day rate type role. And then I thought, this is great. I'm working for myself. And then I thought, actually, no, I still have a boss. I still have a boss in corporate. So it tentatively moved out of that, and then went into sort of full-time working in my business, my coaching business at the time. And then I started my podcast, my very first podcast. And I was inundated with people going, how did you do this? How do you make money from a podcast? How do you even, what microphone do I need? Like constant questions. So I thought, maybe there's something here. And I just took to it like a duck to water. I loved podcasting. I've always been quite techy. I've loved it. And I've been listening to them for years. So I started doing little workshops on the side, doing a bit of help here and there. And then 3 years ago, I was in a mutual friend's mastermind, in the lovely Ruth's mastermind.
Yeah, you just interviewed her.
I know. And it was one of the days there where the consultancy that I was working with, they were about to offer me an extended contract. And on that day that I was there, I was like, should I, shouldn't I? And then they rang me during the day whilst I was at the mastermind. And I said, it was the first time I said, no, I'm not going to do it. So that was it. It was like, right, that's it. And I'm going all in on podcasting.
Was that a head or a heart decision, do you think? Was that a...
Oh, it was complete heart. Complete heart.
Was your head going, what are you doing?
Yeah, my head was going, what the heck? I'd spent thousands and thousands of pounds on my education. I'd done a master's. It felt like I was turning my back on it. But of course, you don't know it at the time, but you still use all of that stuff as a business owner. Of course you do. I just went all in, and I've built it up over the last 3 years. We've got employees. We're just about to sign a contract for offices in my hometown. So it's gone from strength to strength. And the stuff I love the most is days like today. It's days like today when, you get a client who was sort of really worried about getting started at the first place. Am I going to be able to do it? And you take them through, and they launch, and they realise how much they should have done it, because you've had some amazing feedback this morning already, which is fabulous. I'm loving it. I've loved what I've done. So my careers have been training, HR, mentoring, head of HR, got out of it, went into coaching full time, and now I sort of do a blend of sort of coaching work and the agency work. So,
amazing. And you're brilliant at it. You can feel it. You can feel your passion is when someone's in that fire, and they have, you can sense it from them. Absolutely.
I know, you can feel it from people, because I've been there as well.
Possible, isn't it?
That dread of hitting publish, like, what are people going to say? Are they going to listen? So I get it. I understand it entirely.
I was thinking of the man in the arena quote this morning. I'm like, going to just tiptoe into the arena quietly. I'm like, well, done that. We're just going to stride in like Beyonce. Sequins and hair.
Wear that crown.
So from your time in the corporate world then, what did you feel were the challenges that female leaders really faced that you saw and experienced?
Well, aside from the ridiculous pay gap, which is still there, it really is.
Yes.
I saw that myself in my own role. I think for me, because this was obviously pre-COVID, for me it was this reluctance to look at things in a different way and work in different ways and understand the challenges that people have. And that was a big one for me, that, you know, it wasn't as supportive as I think it could have been. I think now they can't not, you know, they've had their eyes open to it. Yeah. And I think some of the other challenges were, you know, women feeling that they could speak out and be honest and be truthful about what was going on for them, but also about sharing their ideas and getting support for those ideas and stepping up into that sort of first leadership role. So a lot of my role in HR was about seeing people come in at sort of graduate level and then seeing their career develop. And they'd come in bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, and then it looked like, you know, they were just downtrodden by 3 years in.
Yeah.
It's that whole burnout culture that seems to be embedded into corporate, which is such a shame. And I know we are seeming to turn a corner with it, but it was that feeling that people felt they had to do a hell of a lot more than they actually had to do to get ahead. And women in particular felt that they somehow had to prove themselves. Yeah, it just didn't sit right with me. But yeah, that I think they were the biggest challenges for me in particular. It was about that flexibility. It was about that, you know, I can still deliver what you want me to deliver to an even better level if I don't have to be sat in this office chair.
Yeah. I was very excuse me, I think when it was the biggest thing in my life. So I went through a separation and divorce when I was in corporate, and then it was like, to fill that gap in my life, I'm just going to go all in. If that's not going to work, I'm just going to focus on my corporate career. And I ran big launches. So launch week or launch month would just be, you just wouldn't see me. I wouldn't book anything in. I wouldn't really be doing anything else much. And it was absolutely that. I felt like if I was the first in and then the last out, but actually I made myself kind of invisible, because and I talk about this in the podcast, I was kind of assumed that I'd always be there. And I was demonstrating my value and worth was in the amount that I gave, rather than having that impact and influence that if I did less, I'd actually have more, because I'd have more energy and be, you know, more on fire in the time that I was there, rather than just the hours. And also I wasn't setting the boundaries. I wasn't saying no. It was like, oh, development opportunity. Yeah, let me do that. Oh, this extra thing. Oh, I'll do that.
And you don't trust it, do you, when you hear people say, slow down to speed up or do less? You don't trust it at all. And you think, yeah, whatever. But then you actually realise that actually works tremendously well. So I totally resonate with that. You know, that feeling of having to do more to feel seen. And to feel like you're in the running for things. So absolutely. People in that situation.
What would you say is your biggest lesson from your time in the corporate world then?
Oh my goodness, I can't even. There's so many. I think it's just, I'll reframe the question a little bit if you don't mind.
Of course not.
What would I tell myself again if I was getting into corporate?
I
think it's that, you know, what I've learned from it. What would I tell myself going back? For me, it would be to have boundaries really early on in my career. Don't be the one that says yes to everything. Trust that actually I'm bloody good at what I do. And have that self-confidence. To know that you know what you're doing. So set your boundaries. Don't say yes to everything. Speak up when you have that little voice in your head when you're in a meeting and all the guys are chatting and you think, yeah, but I've got an idea. Put your bloody hand up. Tell people what you're thinking. So speak your mind. You know, I'm all about using your voice to get the message out. Obviously that's what we do. So that would be what I would say to people. You know, don't be afraid of using your voice. Speak up, put your hand up, but don't say yes to everything.
Definitely. And I think you role model, I talk about again with one of the most recent episodes we recorded that's not yet released is the saying no and boundaries, because actually you're the role model, you own those, you own setting them. So if you're saying yes to everything, you have no boundaries and you're working all the hours. And I've just been working with a corporate through this year, and actually it was going to be a face-to-face program, became an online program, and one of the things we talked about, the impact of working from home, and some of these women taking their phone to the bathroom, taking it to the loo because they thought their boss was going to catch them out, but it wasn't. But you wouldn't do that in the office. So yeah. why now? And just challenging on that. Yeah. And it was really brilliant to hear that some of them had gone from, having their laptop out on the kitchen table because that was the space that they had, to actually at the end of the day, literally turn everything off, close it, put it in the bag, put it away, and that becomes their kitchen again rather than their kitchen office. Yeah. And just owning those boundaries, saying my value and worth is it's I'm demonstrating, role modeling that every day, in saying no, in having boundaries, in knowing that there's a cut-off time for work, and then the world's not going to fall apart if it waits till tomorrow.
So true. It's the same when I started my business as well, that you're on your sofa, you're on your kitchen table. Now I've got an office and we're going into offices as well. It's easier to shut the door and put your mind off work. But it takes a while to know that that's okay.
Definitely. Right. Yeah, I'm guard an office, I think, when we move.
Yeah.
I really, really want to. So I can just do that and just close the door and
close the door, put it all behind
you. So if you were to think again of your time in the corporate world and from what you've learned since, what changes do you think are needed to really help women to find their fire and have that impact and influence, and more than ever?
Yeah, so I think leadership training needs to happen when people start in roles that aren't in leadership. I think it starts with self-leadership. I think it starts with people being able to own their own development. And absolutely. 100%, because I saw far too often, especially being in HR, that people were put into roles because they were good at their job, not that they were leaders. So for me, I think something that could change is, as soon as somebody's coming into a role, to start talking about leadership, even if they're not thinking of being in a leadership role, but self-leadership, how they can manage themselves, how they can be confident, how they can show up. So that's what I would I think that's the biggest thing that could happen.
Yeah.
Prior to COVID, I would have said the flexibility and the different ways of working, but we seem to be embracing that a bit more now. But I think for me, it comes down to that self-leadership and having those conversations earlier on.
Yeah, which is the first podcast episode.
Nice segue. Nice segue.
Wow, you've done this before.
That's why you pay me the books.
But it's so true. We were saying it. We were talking about it with Ruth earlier, and it's, if you can't lead yourself, how are you going to lead? How are you going to lead a team if you don't know and honor your needs and your wants?
Completely.
And you are a leader. Like, and the other thing is, with calling myself a leadership coach, it was that, are people going to think they can't work with me? But it's actually, if every one of us, from the day we're born to the day we die, we're a leader of one.
Yeah.
So why not start there?
Yeah.
Why not get really fucking good at that before you start leading a team, leading a division, leading a business? Because if you can do that and do that well, you're going to be a better leader anyway. You're going to have more energy. You're going to have more excitement and passion because you've looked after yourself.
Yeah. And
there's this brilliant tool that I use that, like a Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but we get clients to kind of do their own version of it, where they're kind of thinking about, well, I know for me, for example, if I'm hungry and I'm tired, I'm not worth being around. Like, it's not a good place to be. So my partner knows well enough now, and he's like, especially in a launch week or something, it's like, do you need a hug? Do you need a nap? Or do you need some food? I'm like, normally
just like throwing bananas at you before he talks to you.
A food nap, please, in that order.
I totally get that hangry phase.
Awful. I'm just
terrible with that food.
Like, right, we need to feed you. Sit down. I'm going to feed you something. And then he's like, then we can have a normal conversation again.
Yeah, I get that entirely.
So where can people find more about your brilliant podcast agency?
Yeah, sure. So the website is thepodcastboutique.com if you want to find out more about us there. But I'm on Instagram as the Podcast Boutique, and we have a free community on Facebook called the Podcasting for Business Community. So yeah, it's full of people like you, mainly women, but there's men and women in there who are either looking to start a podcast, you're podcast curious, or you've already got a podcast. Yeah, come and find us there. But amazing. What I will say to everybody who's watching this, take out your phone right now, go over to the podcast app, subscribe or follow to Nicola's podcast, because honestly, it's going to be the best thing you listen to today. And I'm not just saying that, it is brilliant. It's fantastic. You've done
thank you. Thank you. Thank you for getting me there as well. Lynsay, this has happened. I can't do it. It's awful. I can't listen to my own voice. Lynsay, that was the worst thing I've ever spoken.
You're going to have to get used to it, unfortunately.
It is true.
Yeah.
My partner was saying today when we get on our flights, like, I might listen to a podcast. I was like, I know of it. Interesting and brilliant new podcast launched today, available on iTunes and Spotify and Amazon. He's like, oh God.
He's got to listen to it. He's got to.
I think he will, bless him. I think he'll have to. So, yeah. Oh, thank you so much for today. And thank you for all your help for everything.
You're welcome. Congratulations and enjoy your holiday.
Thank you. Bye, everyone. I'll be back at 11 with Susie, and then I will be quieting down while I'm actually on a flight. So, yeah. Lots of everyone. Bye.
Bye.